Our guest today is Anuja Chandramouli. She is a best selling author and a new age Indian classicist, widely regarded as one of the finest writers in mythology, historical fiction, and fantasy. She followed up her highly acclaimed debut novel Arjuna, Saga of a Pandava Warrior Prince, which was named as one of the top five sellers in Indian writing category for the year of 2012 by Amazon India, with Kamadeva, the god of desire, Shakti, the divine feminine, Yama's lieutenant, and its sequel, Yama's Lieutenant and the Stone Witch. Her article, her articles, short stories, and book reviews appear in various publications like the New Indian Express, The Hindu, Scroll In, and Femina. Her other books are Kartikeya, the Destroyer's Son, Prithviraj Chauhan, the Emperor of Hearts, Padmavati, the Burning Queen, Ganga, the Constant Goddess, and Muhammad bin Tughlaq, A Tale of a Tyrant. Her book Mohini, The Enchantress, was the winner of JK Papers and Times of India Popular Choice Author Award for 2021. Her books are also available as audiobooks and have been translated into Hindi. Abhimanyu, Son of Arjuna, is her latest book and has been shortlisted for the Atta Kalata Bangalore Literature Festival Book Prize. An accomplished TEDx speaker and storyteller, Anuja Chandramouli regularly conducts workshops on creative writing, mythology, and empowerment in schools and colleges across the country. Her Mahabharata and Ramayana with Anuja storytelling series is now available on YouTube, Spotify, TuneIn, Alexa, Apple Podcasts. She is a trained Bharatanatyam dancer. This mother of two little girls lives in Sivakashi, Tamil Nadu. That was quite a bio and introduction, but I think we have missed that your latest release is actually Girl Talk, a contemporary novel. So welcome, Anuja. Thank you for taking out the time and being here to share your experience and wisdom.
Hi, Devdatta. It's so nice to be here. Thank you so much for that very, very lovely intro. Love the initiative, and I'm so glad to do this with you guys today.
Thanks so much. So that was an inspiring bio, right? But we would really like to get to know you a bit better. And it would be great if you can tell us about Anuja, who Anuja is when she's not writing.
Actually, I always say that I'm very, very boring outside of my books, I'm sure, because I really can't think of much to say about myself. I just try to keep myself busy with the mothering, the writing, and the dancing. And when I'm not doing that, I'm commit health and wellness. So, I'll throw in a little yoga and meditation to feel better about my sugar habit, which I'm always in the process of trying to kick and not quite succeeding yet. So work in progress over there. And I love reading. So I think my problem nowadays is I don't read as much as I used to, and sometimes it's research which counts as work. So it's a good thing I love reading as much as I do because it keeps me sane, it keeps me grounded. So I love that. So that's just it. And I tried during the lockdown, I started experimenting and adding to my repertoire as a chef. So that's something I also do. So, just keep myself busy. That's about it.
Nice. So you have a sweet tooth. We know what to get you when we meet you. So your debut book was Arjuna, and your latest mythofiction is Abhimanyu. Seems like you have come a full circle, starting with the father to the son. So, but what we would love to know is like, what do you remember the most from your pre-debut days, like early writing days? Maybe some mistakes that you now know to avoid, and maybe some lessons or rituals that have, served you well over the years.
Yeah, see, it seems I'm carbon dating myself here, but it feels like a really long time ago when I was just starting out. And you have all these ideas about what it takes, about what it means to be a published author. You think of Wilbur Smith, Jeffrey Archer, all your favorites, and they lead these swashbuckling lifestyles. And you know that John Grisham bought a basketball team or something like that, I think. And Wilbur Smith has some house. He has houses all over the world, and they have 400 rooms or something. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you get the picture. So that's the dream. You want to succeed. You want people in every corner of the world to read your book. And you think all it takes is, you work your butt off, you get that first book written, and then that you think that's the toughest part of it. You think, okay, that's it. I need to finish the writing, and then, you do the thing where you try to get it published, and that's when the real struggle begins. And you think, okay, once I find the publisher, and my book's going to go into, it's all happening. I've signed the contract, the book's going to come out, and you dare to dream and hope, and you think, okay, the hard part's behind me. But no, it isn't. Any author will tell you that, it's like a video game where you finish one level, you go to the next level, and it's more advanced, more tricky. So, you have the editing, you have the waiting. Editing is the tedious, gruesome part of the job, because your book is your baby, and you don't want anyone's hands on your baby, and you don't want them to chop, slice their way through it. But it's a very, very integral part of writing. So you suck it up and you think, okay, it's all in the interest of the book. Let me do it. And then there's marketing, promoting, and no one tells you that, there are very, very, very few who succeed in this business, who are actually read. I think the last big seller was J.K. Rowling. I think there are less readers than ever before and more writers than ever before. It's how it is. So, I would, and another thing I remember from those days is there's a lot of fear and insecurity when you write. You make heavy weather out of the smallest thing. One sentence, you're like just laboring over it and you're killing yourself, and not in a very good way. You put so much of yourself, and it's with time that you learn to work smart over just working really, really hard, really just putting so much of yourself. And it's grueling emotionally and mentally and even physically. It takes its toll on you, and you feel that you buy into the myth that artists need to suffer in order to succeed. I would tell myself that, that's so, I would tell my younger self, please don't do that. You will suffer down the line when you can't take it physically. So I will tell myself, work smart, have a little bit more confidence, and don't run around with this delusional outlook. No, be more realistic, be more practical. Artists need that. We start off by being authors, writers. All of us, we start off very, in a very dreamy, idealistic sort of way. I would tell myself to temper it with a little bit of a healthy dose of practicality, and, to commit yourself to the nitty gritties of your craft. Do the grunt work, I would say, to survive in this field, while also making sure that you don't starve. Literally, don't starve. You have to make it sustainable for yourself. That's the advice I would give myself. I wish I'd known these things. I was deliberately blind.
We can't really blame it. That's what got you here today, right? End of the day. So that was also part of what you had to go through. Anyway, I think you have done well with both mythofiction and historical fiction. And the common thread in both is the amount of research and knowledge you need to write a book. So, what are your main tips on research and double checking facts for aspiring writers?
Okay, so again, I love researching almost as much as I love reading. So that's good news for me. It's important because, you can't really scrimp when it comes to these things. Doing the research when it comes to historical fiction or mythology, the research is very, 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 very important. It's the foundation on which you build. So don't hurry through it. Don't look for shortcuts, because you need to do that. You need to build that you need to have that solid foundation. So do enjoy that process, take lots of notes, be very, very, very thorough. And the thing with research is, you go down so many rabbit holes. There's so much to explore, so many threads that are tempting and tantalizing, and they call to you, but you have to stay focused on what you are researching, while also you strike that balance, while also, keeping in mind the areas which need to be explored perhaps at a later date. So it's a lovely process, the researching part of it. And I like to, research multiple sources. See, if you're take one king, let's just take for example Prithviraj Chauhan. So I would read all the Indian sources on that, and I will also read sources from across the border, what his enemies had to say about him, because there's always a political agenda involved with these characters. So it's nice to have multiple viewpoints. And you know what, everyone, there's the saying, I think, there's your version, there's my version, and there's the truth. So nobody, let's face it, there are so many brilliant scholars out there who claim they've written the definitive book on the subject. No, it's never like that. There's always a source with contradictory information, and you need to gather these pieces together carefully. Even if it's like thousands and thousands of pieces, gather it carefully, gather it lovingly, put it together for yourself till this very organic picture emerges. And that's when, you really lean into it, and you do your best by these characters, whether it's mythology, whether it's history. Ultimately, you're trying to do your best by them. Treat the source material with a lot of respect. And I really do not recommend, I know it's today everyone says these provocative things on social media just so they can get some traction, and I do not recommend it, because it's a very sensitive, these are very sensitive subjects. So it's nice if you treat, if you come from a place of love and respect for the character, for this material which has been passed down for generations, and try to do the very best you can by these characters. It's not about you, it's about the character. And I like that. I find it humbling and inspiring that these characters have, been around before I was born, and they're going to be around after I'm born, because I mean, after I'm dead, they are immortal. And I love that. I just have nothing but awe and respect for all the characters I've worked with in history and mythology.
Yeah, but with mythofiction and historical fiction, there comes this thin line of where you have to do a balancing act of retaining what reality you can while mixing it with fiction. How do you decide where the line is?
Okay, so what I always say is that there are elements of mythology in history, and there are elements of history in mythology. You need to be aware of that. I'm very, very suspicious when you're talking about mythology and people say it's history. And you're talking about history and someone dismisses it outright and says, no, it's just a legend, it's a fable, it's concocted in somebody's imagination. It's neither here nor there. I know everyone likes this black and white approach. Keep it simple. This is this is that. History is for the scholars, the historians, and we take this stuff seriously. Whereas mythology is just for storytellers and bards. I get very impatient with distinctions like that, because, see, as I pointed out, I call it faction. There is fact and there's fiction, there has to be a harmonious blend between the two. And it's true whether you're writing history or mythology. You can give all the scholarly sources in the world to bolster a certain narrative, but it need not be 100% accurate. You need to look at it from the proper perspective. See, even this conversation which we are having right now, it's being recorded, yes, but there's so much room for misinterpretation, wouldn't you say? All of you, if somebody asks you what the hell was she talking about, I'm sure everyone will have a different version, and you'll feel, hey, I was there, I listened to her, this is it. And I will say, no, they didn't get me at all, or so and so got me, and so didn't. It's complicated. And just we're talking about characters, we're talking about historical figures from centuries ago. So we have to allow for the elements of inaccuracy, bias, the political agenda which has seeped in over the ages. Because even now, see, political agendas, political correctness, these things keep changing. So we can't, nothing is set in stone when it comes to history and mythology, which is why I say that, you need to do your research very, very thoroughly. Uh, use all the sources available to you from across the border, from everywhere. And, you have to it's the same, put the pieces together. Sometimes there will be gaps in the narrative. There'll be strands that are so contradictory that you have to make a judgment call. You have to think, okay, this is the information I have, so I'm going to take an educated guess about what happened. And while writing historical fiction, you make allowances for fans, for maybe a little dramatic element, or you kind of maybe kind of build up on the drama. It's your call, it's the author's call. Because there's this thing with history, sometimes it's so dusty and obsessed with dates, and students will say, I hate history, it's boring. But history has so much violence. I don't think George R. Martin or any of those violent TV shows, they have nothing on history. History is insane and it's fun. So if you're building up that part of it in your narrative, that's your call, and it's a good call. So it will come down. There's a little bit of personal bias in everything you do, whether it's mythology or history. But we need to remember that I mentioned it already. History and mythology are very, very sensitive. Every part of the world, people kill each other over the stories, whether it's gleaned from mythology or history, which is why I said being deliberately provocative and waving a red flag in front of the bulls on social media is not at all a good idea. It's a cheap trick. Always be respectful. Just try to understand that your version of history is somebody else's mythology. Your idea of mythology is someone's version of history. There's no consensus here, and that's fine. We can listen to everyone's point of view respectfully, and we need to just learn to love the stories, because you can change the world one story at a time.
And I love that you kept the that reference between that somebody's mythology is somebody's history, and somebody's history is somebody else's mythology. That's like really, I've never heard it put it that way, and it makes so much sense to me now. But and coming back to publishing, like you have been published by multiple houses like Lead Start, Rupa, Penguin, now Readomania, and for most of your books you have gotten published on your own. So tell us, how do you approach publishers directly? Do you have to make up a network and build contacts and then approach? And what is the one thing that everybody should keep in mind while dealing with publishing houses directly?
So when it comes to that, I want to talk to those of you who aren't living in a metro, like in Chennai or Mumbai or Bangalore or Delhi, because I used to feel at a disadvantage initially, because I'm from a small town called Sivakasi in Tamil Nadu, which is there in my bio. So at the time I felt I was at a disadvantage. I was thinking, I don't know anybody in this world. I literally do not know anyone in this world. How do I go about it? I would say to all of you, do not be discouraged, because it's pretty much when you are starting out, unless of course you are a celebrity, or you're a politician, or you're an influencer, and you don't have that network, those contacts, it's not a problem, because sometimes all it takes is good old-fashioned determination and resilience. Just don't give up because 20 people said get lost to you, shut the door in your face. Be prepared for that. Because see, all the bestsellers in the world, they'll tell you that I for my first book, I was rejected 20 times, 30 times, 40 times. They'll all give you a number like that. So it's okay. It happens to everybody. So now it's very simple. All the major publishing houses, they have an official website. All you need to do is go to the official website and look at the submission guidelines. It is that simple. Follow the instructions to the letter. Do not mess around with that stuff, because that's just because you have to remember that they get thousands of unsolicited manuscripts on an hourly basis, I'm sure. I mentioned that there are more writers than readers now. So if you mess around with the instructions they've given you, that's reason enough for them to filter you out. You won't make it past round one. So just follow the instructions and keep it very crisp, clean. send in your manuscript as per their requirements. Some of them will ask you for the first 3 chapters. Some of them may return and ask you for the entire manuscript. They'll ask you for a concept note. Now, the thing is, you think, oh God, if they just read my book, they'll know how brilliant it is. But publishers are very busy people. They're not going to read your full book out, right? So if they ask you for a concept note, or if they're asking you for a synopsis, don't half-ass your work, your way through it. Do a thorough job. Write a brilliant concept note, synopsis, edit, re-edit, make it brilliant. It has to represent you, your concept note or your synopsis or your book proposal, whatever they're asking you for. Uh, there are plenty of tutorials online about how you can go about it, or you can always talk to people in the business. If you know, if you don't, like I said, Google Guruji is there. Turn to him for or her for help. I'm sure you'll get what you need. So just don't half-ass your way through it. Do it and send it to every single publisher out there. Go to their website. It'll be frustrating. There'll be little differences. So don't cut, copy, paste. Don't if you're going to email HarperCollins, do not put Penguin in your concept note. See, these things, little things make a big difference. So do that and hope for the best. Don't give up. I haven't ever self-published, so I really can't speak about that. But some authors do that and they strike gold. So it's all up to you. As long as you are resilient, as long as you don't give up. And another tip I would give is, don't let this, it can become very obsessive for you. You'll start feeling the heaviness of rejection. It'll make you question your self-worth, even if you're the most confident person in the world, which I'm not. I'm neurotic and insecure, so it'll really freak me out. And I'll go around my business and I'll be polite to people and all, but inside my head I'll be dangerously close to exploding. So what I do is I keep myself occupied with things that are not related to writing. I may take up a dance class, or not my usual classical dance. I might just go for a fun Zumba class, yoga, meditation, whatever, whatever floats your boat, basically. If you really love chocolate, stuff your face with chocolate if it makes you feel better. Although I wouldn't recommend it. At some point, you'll need to go to the dentist, and because you'll give yourself cavities. So do not do that. But basically, whatever, little indulgence, go to a spa maybe, but do what it takes to make sure that you're feeling okay, because it's a very rough journey. We are all sensitive people. It can be hard on you. Don't give up. Protect yourself and keep going. And you might even get started on your next book also. That was I wanted to get my first book published, so I did not even think of my second book. And later on, I thought I should have started work on book number 2. So yeah, that's also something. Get started. Don't just keep going. Don't stop the writing. You need all the practice you can get. So keep writing. Write a column, write a short story, submit something here, write something, put up a fun post on FB, something. Just keep moving.
Okay. And for Mohammed bin Tughlaq, you have worked with Kanishka Gupta. So you have that experience of working with a lit agent as well. So how does one approach a lit agent, and what are the benefits of working with an agent?
Yeah, so now a literary agent is a very good idea because he will handle negotiations for you. Some authors are very skilled negotiators. They're good at the other parts of the job. They can hustle, they can promote themselves. Some aren't. So if see, that's a skill set you need to develop, by the way. So even if you have a literary agent, same thing. It's the same as with publishers. All literary agents have official websites. Like Kanishka's would be writer side. So, you can follow the instructions there. I met him at a Lit Fest, and he was quite keen on doing something together. So that's how it happened. But in case you're starting out, go to their website. They're always looking for talent. But the thing with I mentioned it earlier with publishers also, once you've signed the contract, it doesn't mean your work is over. Same thing with a literary agent. He might have got the contract for you. He might have taken care of negotiations. All that is there. But do not rely entirely on your publisher and your literary agent to take care of the next part of publishing a book. Your book, maybe once the delivery is done, it's not over. The next step is marketing, promoting. Now you have to really involve yourself in these areas also. Honestly, it's not my part of the job. I'm an introvert. Sometimes when I start talking, people won't believe I'm an introvert because I'm like blah blah. I sound drunk even if I'm not drinking. So people will be like, "You're an introvert," but I am. It's very hard for me to do the hustle to push, to put myself out there, to do the branding thing. I'm one of those people who wishes it was like the Bronte sisters or something like that. No, they didn't run around on social media. They didn't do book tours. They just sat, wrote, because that's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to share my stories with the world. I didn't want to share myself with the world. But today it's like you have to do the branding thing, and people have to. Your publishers keep saying, no, they need to be able to identify you. So the next thing you know, your mug is all over social media, and you're thinking, oh my God, you can see the pimples in this pic. And, that kind of thing. It's very uncomfortable. But what I would say is, ease into it. Teach yourself all this, what works for you. Because the thing is, nobody can tell you this is exactly what it's going to take to succeed. Nobody knows. Publishers don't know the secret. Even best-selling authors, nobody knows the secret. A whole lot of elements have to come together. The stars have to be aligned. Fairies have to be raining pixie dust on your head at that, when the moon is waxing, all that shit. So nobody knows what the hell they're talking about. Neither do I, trust me. So you have to figure it out as you go along. So you think, okay, this is what I'm comfortable with doing when it comes to promoting and marketing, and, come up with ideas that work for you. Think out of the box. Who the hell knows? You may hit the jackpot. Today, you have lots of there's an entire mushroom industry which no author talks about. Okay, so you have all these bookstagrammers, these hustlers, these frauds who'll show up and they'll say, okay, we'll give you bulk reviews. How many reviews do you want? 1,000 on Amazon, 1,000 on Goodreads. Why don't you just pay 50,000 for 50 reviews? And you're like, what the hell? Are there people out there who are really doing this? Is this what I'm going to do? Because authors mostly, unless you're J.K. Rowling or Wilbur Smith, Jeffrey Archer, all those big names, I don't, they make peanuts. Okay. You need to somehow find a way to make your writing sustainable by coming up with other sources of income. That's something you really need to do if you want to write in peace, just for the joy of writing. So, what I would suggest is, even if you don't have that kind of money for you will feel that you'll have that fear of missing out, a FOMO. No, everyone has it. You think, oh my God, what if the others are doing it? What if I get left behind? All those doubts will come in, and you need not feel bad if you can't afford to pour money down the thing. Don't do that. You can allot a budget which you're comfortable with for promoting your book. Somebody says, okay, I'll give you an honest review. That's what I offer, but I would like to be paid. That is fair. Okay, because they need to be paid. Everyone needs to eat. So if you find the rate reasonable, and if it's a genuine book lover, you can do your research. It'll take time. Lots of authors have teams to do this. I don't. I do not have a team. I do it on my own, on Instagram, on FB. Whoever reaches out to me, and if they express an interest in my book, I'm very grateful. And if their terms are reasonable, I'm happy. I'll have a little quota for book promos. I keep that aside, and whatever I can afford to, I will pay reviewers. Sometimes they only ask you for a copy of the book, and sometimes that's fine. It all depends. So it depends what you're comfortable with, and I try to come up with these. I don't know how to make reels on Instagram, by the way, but like I said, publishers are obsessed. They'll keep bugging you about branding and putting yourself out there. So I turned to Google Guruji and I learned how to. I found that there are other apps to make reels, and I try just before my book comes out or something. I will try and come up with some fun reels. And again, that's a beastly business, because I'm looking and I'm thinking, oh my God, you see all the imperfection on your face when you make these reels. Okay, you'll see every blemish, and you'll think, oh my God, my hair looks so frizzy. How do these influencers look so awesome all the time? So all that will come in. So I'll try to not take it too seriously. I'll try to make it fun for myself, and I'll think of it like an ad. Okay, if I'm writing an ad for myself, for my book, my product, how would I go about it? So I come up with these fun reels and I put it up, and there'll be so your publishers are happy and you feel like you're doing something for your book, and you stick around, you kind of survive, even if you're from a small town, because of the effort you put in. Hard work always pays off. So even if the results aren't tangible, it allows you to take one day at a time and keep your career afloat in very challenging times. So do the best you can, and do it in a way that makes sense to you.
I think Anuja, I know you since Arjuna, right? For Arjuna, since Arjuna, I've known you, and over the years, I've not seen any change in you, even though you went from a debut author to a successful author to a more successful author. And I've even when I approached you for this FDC, you were like so nice. So long time no see. And it was so nice to talk to you. And I'm sure if readers get to know you, they're going to love you, even if you take your time with your books and not hurry through. Yeah. So now let's come to your latest release, which is like a complete turnaround for you from all your mythology, history, fantasy to a contemporary novel, Girl Talk. Why the change in the genre, and has it affected your marketing strategy and even the writing process?
Okay, so before I answer your question, Devdata or DDS as I knew her is very special to me because she's been, and I'm not just saying that for effect, by the way, and it's not just my way of returning a compliment, a very sweet compliment for which I thank you. But DDS has been a part of my journey from the beginning. You know, she reviewed so many of my books, and she's so sincere, and you're so grateful when people actually read and tell you what they think. She gives very honest feedback, which is something I value because there are lots of reviewers out there who'll just put such a generic review out there and it'll be like so bugging, you know, they haven't actually read your book. So I'm very, very grateful to DDS and I'm glad that we are still in touch and we're very much a part of each other's journey in this because we both love reading and writing. So it's she's a friend and whom I've never met, but I'm grateful for DDS. And
This is the
to
first time we are coming face to face, even
face
on
to face.
camera.
Yes.
Mm.
To answer your question, now readers are very sweet. Those who've read my mythology and historical fiction books, they'll have lots of suggestion in the same genre. They'll say, you've given us Arjuna and Abhimanyu. You owe us Karna." They are like that. They're very sweet, and it's very sweet that they feel they can. They'll say, "No, you owe this to us." I find that very sweet when they make their suggestions. That's nice. But my friends and family, on the other hand, they are tougher customers and they're more brutally honest than my readers actually. So they'll say, "Oh my God, please don't tell me you're not working on mythology or historical fiction, man. We want erotica, we want romance." And I was saying, see, I can't write romance or erotica worth a damn. It's just not me. And they said, "No, no, no, no. You're always full of adult humor and jokes and all that. So you have to do the erotica thing." So maybe it's just all these suggestions are bouncing around in your head actually. And during the lockdown, I didn't have a contract. And I became very, very insecure and neurotic. And everyone's always, sounding the death knell for the publishing industry. And they're saying, "Yeah, reading's dead. Now it's AI also is here. So who the hell needs real authors and who reads anyway? We can barely read those tweets nowadays. Why the hell would we read an entire book?" So, a little bit of negativity and self-doubt seeps in. And you start thinking about your chemistry teacher who told you that you should get a job in the software industry because that's reliable apparently and you never get fired or something. See, there goes that myth. But you start second guessing yourself. You think, okay, maybe I chose the wrong career. What's happening? What if this is a dead end? And I was freaking out, honestly. So I told you, when I'm freaking out, I try to distract myself. I try to do something productive. I try to keep myself busy. So I thought, okay, I'm going to write for fun. I'm just going to write for fun. It's been centuries since I just wrote without a contract hanging over my head. So I thought, okay, let's do this. And I've always wanted to try my hand at horror. So I wrote a few. I thought I'll do something inspired by Stephen King. Maybe write a whole bunch. Maybe put together a collection of short stories, all in the horror genre. So that's how it started out. I was reading, and I was writing, and I sent all my short stories to the New Yorker and all that. Didn't get published, by the way. So rejection all over again. And I'm trying to, be positive. And I was trying to keep myself from bouncing off the walls. So I just kept at it because it was fun. It was really fun. The writing itself was really lovely. I loved writing just for the sake of writing. And Girl Talk was just a short story based on conversations I was having with some friends. Lots of friends, and sometimes even people I don't know that well, they seem very comfortable sharing things with me. And they say stuff like, I think I get it from my mother. People are always telling my mom their deepest, darkest secrets. Even strangers do that with her. So I thought maybe it's the mom in me. And people say that I'm not judgmental, which is, I don't think it's entirely true because I look at everything the way a storyteller would. I'll be thinking, okay, maybe I can just stash it in the vault and use it later. So maybe that's the thing. But whatever, people were sharing all these intimate details from their lives, and it was fun girl talk, all dark stuff. There's sex, there's violence, there's gossip, and I thought, okay. Let's see. I also read news articles and I file away interesting news articles in the vault in case I need story ideas later. That's a tip also for you guys. You read these interesting offbeat stories, you should probably take notes or something, keep a journal so that you can get back to it. So I read about a woman who had been decapitated. So she was apparently a midwife, and a mother and a child were lost. These are poor people, and she must have done her best, poor thing. But the victim's husband and his friend, they drugged her, and they found her decapitated remains. So this was this news story I read, and it was very close to my parents' house where I was staying for the lockdown briefly. So, all this was just churning around in my head. And that's how Girl Talk started. It wasn't originally called Girl Talk. So it was like all these things that was just churning around in my head. It was supposed to be a short story about the dark side of desire, about how this girl is obsessed with this guy she can't have, and it becomes her addiction. And she can't have enough of this guy. So it was just supposed to be a short story, but the story got its claws into me and it wouldn't let me go. And it was unlike anything I've attempted before because usually I do my research. I have a skeleton which I flesh out, and the bare bones is there. Here I had absolutely no idea where the story was headed. So I just trapped myself in, enjoyed the ride. And I wasn't sure. I sent this also to the New Yorker, which rejected me when it was still a short story. But I kept returning to this story. And all these years later, I still can't believe it's published and it's out there. I got rejected left, right, and center for this. Everyone wanted mythology or historical fiction titles from me because there's an established readership right there. So, some publishers aren't kind of on the risk averse side, I guess. So, but with Readomania, I met Dipankar, the founder of Readomania, at a Lit Fest, and he said, "Hey, we've always been talking about working together. Do you have anything for me?" And I told him, about this, and he said, "Hey, we don't typecast authors. Send over a proposal. Let's see." And before you know it, I have a contract and the book is out. So I'm very happy. I'm very, very happy because on the one hand, I wasn't even sure if I wanted it published because it was just a fun exercise. On the other hand, I value it as much as my other book, Babies. So I felt this book also deserved to see the light of day, and I'm very happy that has happened.
Yeah, yeah. So you have already answered some of the audience questions with this. And so I'll just take audience questions afterwards, but we need to do a rapid fire. Are you ready?
Yes.
It has to be rapid fire, okay? Just
Yes.
okay. Your favorite Pandava,
Arjuna,
your favorite villain in Indian history,
Mohammed bin Tughlaq,
one book that you keep going back to read over and over again.
George R. R. Martin's Game of Thrones, the Song of Fire and Ice series.
Okay. One non-fiction book about writing that you would recommend to everybody.
I highly recommend Shastri's How to Be a Literary Sensation. It's hilarious and so true.
Okay. One self-editing tip for beginners.
Uh, it's write drunk, edit sober. And that doesn't literally mean get sloshed and write, but just let it pour out of you. But when you're editing, step back and be merciless. Wield that scalpel, that scissors mercilessly. Okay, don't think every word you've written is gold. Trust me, it's not. So be hard on yourself. Not hard, be detached.
Okay. So now we'll start taking audience questions. And Neha Gupta wants to know, how did you make it sustainable for yourself and what all changes you made for the same?
Okay, I'm a freelancer and I call myself a part-time writer and a full-time mom. So I never turn down work if I can help it. I write columns for New Indian Express, but it's not just New Indian Express. If India Today wants me to submit a column, and lots of newspaper publications use me as a pinch hitter. If somebody hasn't met a deadline, they'll call and they'll say, Anuja, can you like send us something? And I never say no. I'm very, very grateful for any kind of work I receive. So I don't half-ass it either. Even if I have very little time to submit an article, I give it my all and I try to do the very best work I can. Because see, that is how you get more work. When you do not compromise on the craft of it all. Don't ever half-ass your way through it. Do the best you can. Sometimes you'll be under the pump. It'll be difficult, but do the best you can because that's the only way you'll get more work. Be very honest about that. And I do storytelling sessions in school for children, and I do creative writing workshops for older kids. So these are also ways you can supplement your income while also honing your craft. Children are tough, they are a tough audience. So, if you're an author today, it's not enough to just write at home. You also have to be able to talk about your book, even if I find it very difficult. I prefer to let the book talk, do all the talking, but that won't suffice. You have to train yourself to sell your product, and you have to be a good speaker, a good communicator. So working with children keeps you on your toes. If you can engage kids for 1 hour, you can handle any audience in the world. So I'm very, very grateful for all these things which I have in my life. So I do, these are ways I generate an income for myself. But so, like I said, do what works for you. If working with kids doesn't float your boat, try and think of some way you can earn some money for yourself so that you don't feel too much pressure. Otherwise, it's a soul crushing job. There'll be very, very dark days when you think I'm not getting a return of investment for this. Okay, honestly, it will happen. You'll think I've worked so much, I've put my heart and soul into this, and the returns are just not enough. But sometimes the rewards are intangible over here. It's how it makes you feel when you've written something you care intensely about, and it'll open doors for you. Trust me. Every book you write, it will take you on this beautiful, magical journey, and you will meet amazing people. Like I mentioned, how I've met DDS. It's a lonely world when you're a writer. So when you can have this connection through the work you've done, that's very precious. And you can't put a price on everything in the world. Money is important, yes. But sometimes it's just that when I wrote Shakti, there was this flooding incident in Kerala. And this girl contacted me on social media and she said they were waterlogged and marooned in their home. And she said Shakti kept her company. And she said she couldn't put the book down. She reread it, and it was such a special memory for her. And she reached out to share it with me. And that really, you can't put a price on things like that, how it makes you feel. And sometimes that's the reason you write. That's what you hope for when you write a book. So you need to keep all this in mind and prioritize. Money is important. It's not the only thing, but do whatever works for you.
Okay. So Mangesh wants to know that nowadays there are ideas coming up which mix Indian mythology with modern sci-fi and are liked by a variety of audiences and readers. According to you, can such ideas work in the modern times? Will people across various cultures like such ideas?
Yeah, it's actually it's a very happening, trendy genre right now. And I myself experimented with that genre. With Yama's Lieutenant, it was a combination of mythology and fantasy, contemporary meets classical. So it is possible. There's lots of scope there. And I'm always saying you can keep pushing the boundaries creatively. There's no rules, there's no handbook, there's no right or wrong way to go about it. If you think it's a fun thing to explore, please go ahead. Many are experimenting very successfully in this genre. And as I mentioned already, nothing is set in stone. So, the way to keep mythology and history alive is to constantly add to it. You have to put something from the present into the past to ensure that it has a future. So it's definitely something that is cool and fun. And I'm not going to be all puritanical and say, no, 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 these stories were written by the greats, don't mess around with it. No, I think the greats, all of them would love that their stories are still being discussed, something still being added. It's a, lovely tradition of storytelling, and it's always an amazing experience to be part of it.
Mhm. I think, Sumanna, that also kind of answers your question, right? So I'll just skip that one and I'll get on to Tansi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Tansi wants to know if you have ever written historical nonfiction or historical poetry.
Oh my goodness. I think poetry is an acquired taste. For the longest time, I was anti-poetry. I'm big on prose. It took me a while to appreciate really good poetry. So while I appreciate poetry, I'm not sure if I want to dabble in it. Maybe someday. And that too, historical poetry, as you called it, I'm not quite sure if I'm keen to do that because. It's not exactly a strength for me, and I prefer to stick to my strengths. Although I do enjoy wordplay, so it's if it's fun for me. And sometimes reviewers and readers have told me that my prose reads like poetry, and it's inadvertent because I believe in letting the writing happen in a manner that is organic, where somehow you feel like it's flowing out of you and you're staying out of the way and you're not trying to control what happens, to immerse yourself in that flow. That's how I operate. So if it happens that way, I love words and wordplay, then fine. But I'm not sure I'm one of those. I don't have a very structured approach to writing poetry, and I don't have that kind of skill, honestly. And historical, no, or not, not. You wanted to know if I would write historical.
Nonfiction.
Historical
Nonfiction.
non-fiction. Yeah. Yeah, maybe, because I love history. I'm a history buff. So maybe someday I would do that because that's definitely something. There are many, many characters in history I adore and I would love to do something. But I have a feeling I'll go back to historical fiction. Kanishka, my agent, is going on telling me to try something in the non-fiction genre. I do have some ideas, but as of now, let's see. It's too early to talk about that.
Sonia wants to know normally how long does it take for you to, from start to finish, how long does it take you to write a book?
The research itself, I told you I don't like to take shortcuts there. So the research actually takes quite some time. And even when I'm writing, I'll carry on researching because if I feel like I need to go back and do a little bit more research, I will do that as well. So with the researching and the writing, so once the researching is done and I'm in that fun space where the words are flowing and the writing is going on very smoothly, it depends. It depends. I actually write pretty fast, actually. When I'm in that zone, I kind of become obsessed with what I'm writing. So at that point, my output is really, really high. So the research takes longer for me than the actual writing because even as I'm doing the research, I'll be carving the skeleton of my manuscript. So I'll have a definite idea. But the thing is, my characters usually take me by surprise. They are very insistent on telling their own stories. I told you, I just go with the flow. I surrender to the process. It takes a lot of discipline to do that. And for that, you need to start with the research and, get into that zone. So, maybe usually a year, say, with the research and writing. The writing itself, sometimes I've actually got it done in 3 months. That's happened. The research only takes longer.
Okay, I'm going to combine Satish and Shraddha's question because they are related to tips for research. Someone wants to know tips for researching online, and another wants to know if there is a software for organizing your research and notes.
I'm a little old-fashioned when it comes to research. I'm sure there are plenty of apps for having to help you have your research organized in one place. But I have a journal or a notebook usually where I take handwritten notes. It really helps me. sort things out in my head. So a large part of it is handwritten notes, but it's very, very efficient to use MS Word or something like that. Just I use that to keep track of all the sources I'm using. On the one hand, it's my casual, rough and messy notes. Even there, I'll always have the name of the book, the author, all the page number, all that. So I do it very methodically. But I also have a list of authors on MS Word. I'll have that separate list. So authors with their books, and then I'll also put down little notes for myself where I'll say, check this out a little bit more, needs a little bit more research. You need to look this up. And every research book, they give you a list of sources, no? So even in that, go through that thoroughly and see what you need to use, and read as much as you can. Now there's lots of there are a lot. If you go online, you just have to be patient. You'll find what you're looking for. Just use the keywords, right? Try experiment with spellings. With mythology and history, see, say Krishna, somebody would spell it like Krsna. So all that is there. Just use the search engines a little smartly. Try a number of word combinations. There are lots of PDFs. You can subscribe to databases where they will have books. Of course, there's good old Amazon if you want a hard copy, or if you want an ebook also, that's fine. You can get it, and just organize your notes well so that you know exactly where you stand. It'll just help you negotiate this terrain.
Okay, we are almost at the end, so I'll take one last question that even I, it's kind of funny, even I want to know the answer. Anuja, why do you think that Indian superheroes are not that famous?
Because we Indians, we are very, very prickly and sensitive when it comes to Indian mythology and history. We saw the drama with something like someone like Padmavati, right? There is no consensus to this day whether she was an actual historical figure or whether her story was written 2 centuries later. So that's the kind of situation we are living in. So publishers, love, producers, they're all risk averse. Nobody wants to be dragged to court. Nobody wants to deal with death threats and all that. So we are very possessive about our heroes, and we get very angry when somebody tries to make a movie, and we're all saying, sentiments have been hurt. We are very sentimental, sensitive people. So it's all the politics of it. Nobody wants the trouble, I'm guessing. But it's a pity because that it's a treasure trove. If we can do it with sensitivity and with proper research, I'm sure, in future we'll have plenty of Indian superheroes. But see, something like Monkey Man, no, I think Dev Patel made his Monkey Man or something. Even that wasn't released in India, which means I made it a point to watch it on an international flight. It was, I don't think it was offensive or particularly great. It was just a movie. So we really need to take a chill pill. And I love that somebody like Rajamouli has restored interest in Indian history and mythology, and he does reasonably decent work. So, but I still think we need to prioritize good writing when it comes to our movies. And if we handle the source material with respect, I'm sure we'll have lots of amazing Indian superheroes capturing the imagination of the world. And who knows, maybe I'll have an international audience and I'll make buttloads of money, and I'll be bathing in pink champagne or something. I don't know why anyone would want to do that, but okay.
But yeah, as I've already told you before, like Yama's Lieutenant is one of my favorite books that you have written. So maybe we'll see that on screen someday.
I hope so.
Thank you, Anuja. Thank you for I know you're an introvert and still you came online and shared so much with us. We are so honored to have you today. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much to all of you for joining in, for the very lovely, insightful questions. And DDS, I'm so glad that we got a chance to connect again. And thank you for your very kind words. I wish all of you the very, very best of luck.